Thank you so much for joining us on Perspectives with Asima Silva. And of course, as always, Perspectives is recorded at WCCA TV, which is channel 194, and we record right here in the heart of the city. So glad today to have with us just a wonderful volunteer, Joyce. And Asima, as you know, she works with the refugee community and is just one of a number of people who give their time so selflessly. But we have all these hot spots in the world where, unfortunately, these kinds of services are certainly needed. And Worcester is a refugee city.
It is, and thank you, Joyce, for joining us today.
You're welcome.
And you are a volunteer with Ascentria, one of the organizations in Worcester that deals with refugees and services regarding them. But there was some interesting stories that I had heard that you had regarding refugee families that you have helped in the past, and we just wanted to get started and hear some of those stories.
Yes, I've been volunteering it was an organization called Lutheran Social Services, and they recently, within the last couple of years, changed their name to deal with refugees to Ascentria. It was church-based before. It is still church-based in some regards, but it's much more inclusive right now. And I've been doing this work for approximately 15 years. My husband got started when we had an old pickup truck, and the director of the organization found out that he owned a truck, and that was the simple way that he got involved.
You know what? That is always, that's always the way, right? Somebody needs something, and there's a good volunteer, a good soul who's going to help out. So that's how you guys got sucked in. But obviously,
yes.
it was great. I mean, you talk about this being faith-based.
He'd come home with these stories, and he said, "Oh, Joyce, you just need to meet these people because they've just had such incredible lives, and you're so interesting to talk with." And so I got involved, and once I was involved, I was hooked. And I've been doing it pretty much full time.
Wow. Well, I know that, and as Asima said, we want to hear some of these stories of the people that you have met and what has made you this last 15 years so meaningful. What is do you have an average day? What's the average day like?
Well, the average day is that first of all, we're usually paired with a family or a person as they come in, so that you kind of joined at the hip for a period of time. They had formed a group called Community Circles, which tries to contact different churches in the area or synagogues that are willing to work with these people. And that's how we meet with the people, and we get friendly with them, learn what they need. Most of them come here with a plastic bag with an I-94, which is the little card that allows you into the country, the clothing on their backs, and that is it.
Wow.
Some of the more fortunate people that had come in from the Middle East that were more middle class came in with a suitcase full of clothing, but that was all they had as well. So it's, how do you set up an apartment instantly for these people? How do you navigate an ATM?
Wow. All the things we take for granted
All the things
that
we
they
take
have
for
to
granted.
that they have to learn. I just when you talk about that, some people come with literally just the clothes on their back. Some people maybe have a little bit more. Most people who come here, because we are a refugee city, I'm thinking that they're fleeing war-torn country right there, right? Or exactly, that their lives were really in danger, or that they've been living for years in some cases, probably just in a tent somewhere.
Yeah, these people that come, most of them come from refugee camps. Not all, but I would say a large majority of them. The woman I'm presently working with is one of the women. She's from Central African Republic. They've just had a war there. It's been ongoing, back and forth, very similar to the Congo. And she spent 12 years in a refugee camp in Chad, which is, by hearsay, one of the worst camps in the world. They've had extreme difficulty getting food into that camp because of the war that's going on around them. It keeps them from bringing in the supplies and food and so forth that they need. They even went to the extent of farming at that UN camp in order to survive. And so, she's here now. She's illiterate in her own language. She speaks 11 languages.
Wow.
Huh.
She is not stupid. She
Right.
just has never had the opportunity for schooling. But this is one of the more difficult cases to settle, because she not only has to learn English, which she has done, but we're going to try to get her so that she's more literate.
Okay, so walk me through the whole thing. I know that she's just in the process.
Yes.
So she arrives.
Yes.
With her whole family, just her?
She arrived with 6 children.
Wow.
Most of them arrive with children.
Children. Okay.
Sick
So
and pregnant.
Yeah. 6 children and pregnant. Okay.
As a result of a rape.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So,
And so-
arrives.
Yes.
You're assigned to help her.
Yes.
And the first thing that you do is get a roof over her head. There's a place for her to stay.
Ascentria takes care of locating an apartment, getting her into an apartment. But there are complications with all these kinds of things, like first of all, having such a
kids.
large group.
Yeah.
Right, family.
Yeah.
You have to get a large apartment because of the code. So
Well,
a 6-bedroom
sure.
apartment costs $1,100 a month,
Right.
and her temporary income from
She gets some sort of assistance from the.
TAFDC is about $938 a month.
And all of that would then be eaten up by the rent plus more.
Plus more.
So where does that come? Is that from the state? Is that from the U.S.
yes,
government?
no, that's
From the
that's
state?
from the state.
State,
Yes,
okay, interesting,
And
all right.
she is on food stamps as well. All the refugees have access to that for a short period of time. But what people don't understand is that ends after a certain length of time. Her income will end in December. Her child will be 2. That was born here. He's
Yeah.
a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
And so that income will end.
How can she possibly get a job?
She is about to be employed.
No
That's
kidding.
the good news.
Wonderful.
Yes.
But what about childcare?
I fought very hard to get childcare for her. That was my role.
Yeah.
My role is to be the bulldog for all of
So you really are an advocate.
different. I have to be pushy and be.
So, but listen, I have to say, I mean, bless you, because you said you're volunteering, but yet this is more than a full-time job, and
Yeah.
you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart.
Yeah, but it's very fulfilling.
Well, no, I understand that.
I mean,
but
it's
but
like
this is
it's much better than money.
no argument.
Right.
I'm just thinking that there's a great need, and here you are you're personally going through all this as an
For
advocate.
15 plus years.
Right, and
Yeah.
there is no compensation. Now I'm curious, and I want to hear more about her story, which seems as if it's going to have a happy ending. How do you get? How many of you, Joyce, are there out there working?
I
Is it
think there's
difficult?
quite a few in the
Yeah.
city. We have an interfaith group that works, that gets together and tries to solve problems, I'm not one for meetings. I taught in school
Not
system.
many people are.
I taught in Rutland. As a matter of fact, I was an art teacher there for 13 or more years. And I never went to a teacher's meeting because I don't do meetings. I
Yeah.
simply do not do meetings.
Yeah, well,
So-
it's interesting. We're just sitting here. We've just met, but clearly your personality and I don't do meetings. But that's the personality that somebody needs if you're going to advocate for them and get them the services that they need.
Right.
Yeah.
It took me 21 hours to get her childcare, but I did it. I just kept going from agency to agency to agency because there were problems that, they said, oh, she can only get part-time childcare, but she needed full-time childcare, and it was just back and forth and back and forth. And I learned, this is on-the-job training, I learned that the state pays differently for part-time childcare as opposed to full-time childcare. So, I've learned that for these single moms, even moms that aren't refugees. So for single moms, it's just a real struggle.
Oh my
Well, with
goodness,
this
yeah.
story, I'm curious, what was your first story that you said you were hooked with? What was that one incident or one person that you were helping, the difference that you might have made in their lives that hooked you onto this volunteer
Well, it's like,
work?
it's not just one. I helped a woman from Bhutan one time, and I really wasn't working directly with her. But we had a large, this was several years ago, and we had a large influx of refugees right in one lump. It seems to happen that way. It's like the floodgates open and there's a large group that comes and everybody's crazy, and then it settles down, it's flow. So there was this large group, and it happened to be around Thanksgiving time, and we had a lot of donations that were given to us. There was one farm that allowed somebody to come in and glean the field, like the old biblical thing of cleaning the field, getting what was left. And there was a lot of beautiful produce, beets and potatoes and everything. And so I took them and put them in the truck, and we got in turkeys, and I'd run out of, I had plenty of vegetables, but I had run out of turkey. So I stopped down here, Compare Food, and got some of the big chickens that they had, great big ones. And I stopped at this Bhutan lady's house. I knocked at the door, and they didn't speak any English, and there was like 10 of them in the house. And I just loaded them up, and I just left. I didn't know them.
Right.
And about 5 years later, that woman met me over at Edward Kennedy Center. I was with another refugee, and she came over and said, I know you. You're the woman that brought me that chicken that night.
Wow.
She said, we had no food in the house. And she said, I have prayed for you every night.
Wow.
And it's those kind of stories that
Sure.
just keep you moving.
And then you
You
just-
think of them,
That's
and
amazing.
you think if you can just make that little bit of difference in one person's life,
Wow.
that it's really fulfilling.
Worcester's a refugee city. Now, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean that we have more services for refugees here in Worcester? Is that a designation
I think the State Department and the UN decide where that's going to be. And I'm not sure about the politics involved. I don't know if the city plays a role or not. But my information is that they were looking for cities with low rents and job opportunities. But of course, in the last 15 years, rents have changed dramatically in Worcester, and so have job opportunities in some respects. So that, the manufacturing jobs, a lot of them have left.
Wow. Yeah.
And it becomes more of a service
Yeah,
community.
no, absolutely. So that was one of your more memorable with the woman from Bhutan. You say that now it's Central Africa that many of the refugees are coming from.
I've got 2 families from Central African Republic,
yeah.
yeah. And it's really wonderful, the interaction. I met you at an interfaith group up at the mosque
Right.
several weeks ago. And there was a great dialogue that evening. The interesting thing that I've had is working with this woman that's Muslim. One day, after her English got pretty good, she's been going to ESL classes, and we do a lot of sign language and use Google Translate in order to talk. She said, call mon ami, my friend Severine. She said, call her. She said, she's Christian, she's looking for a church. So I said, God works in mysterious ways sometimes, So now Severine is part of our faith community. And today, this very day, they left for a weekend at the Cape because there's a group down on Cape Cod called Nauset Interfaith. And they have families that have opened their homes for the weekend for refugee families.
Wow.
And this is the second group we sent this year, and we did it last year as well. So it's just You know,
It's amazing.
They're
It
good,
really is, yeah.
They're
and,
good stories.
And right, exactly. Wait, so as long as we're on the stories, 15 years, do you have one that sticks in your mind and maybe more memorable than the others?
They're all memorable.
Yeah.
They're all memorable because all of these people have gone through extraordinary hardships. And as I said, I go to bed at night and think to myself, I wonder if I would have had the strength to do what they have done and to go through what they have done and still be upbeat and forward-looking. And I think we have to realize that the people that come here are the risk takers. They're the ones that, you know, have walked for miles to get where they had to be to survive. These are the people that they've just gone through such horrible situations. They've been held at knife point for a week. They've been raped. They've come away with terrible diseases. It's just, they've been the survivors of war.
Right.
When they tell you these stories, is it hard for them to open up? Just what you have just said, it must be hard for them to trust people, or they come from very repressive regimes and then they come to America and here you are and they meet you. Is there a period of adjustment where it's hard for them?
It's
the language,
interesting.
too.
Yeah,
The language
right. And how do
barrier,
you
too.
communicate?
It's very interesting you asked that question because I was asked a question by the family on the Cape that is taking in this one family. They asked me, where's her husband? And I said, I don't know where her husband is. I've only worked with her for 12 weeks. I don't ask those kinds of questions. What I do is I try to work on gaining their trust first, because that trust is so important, you know, to the point where, you know, if somebody needs to pay an electric bill and can't get down to the store, they'll trust me with the money to go pay the bill, and then I'll bring them the receipt, you know. But they trust me with their money and with their lives, really, you know.
Well, as horrible as the refugee camp must be, and I can't
This
imagine.
must be a
This
heaven
is
for
scary,
them.
right? It is, and yet at the same time, it's probably scary because there you knew the daily routine. As horrible as it may have been, you knew, here's what I do. I go and I get water, or here's where I get in line to get food, or here's the guy I try to stay away from. And here you come, and the language, and it must just be so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And the
can't-
culture,
yeah,
not just the
right,
language,
right.
but the
The
cultural
culture.
changes.
Yeah, the culture. The Liberian boys had a very difficult time, particularly the teenage boys that came in, because they were used to a culture where you established your manhood by being the toughest one in the crew and beating up everybody else. That's how you did it, because it was like dogs.
We tend to frown on that here.
You ever,
Right.
Yeah.
you ever seen
Just a little.
a pack of dogs? It's a kind. That's a same kind of. It's like the alpha male has
Right.
got to establish himself, you know. And so a lot of them got into trouble at school, you know.
Because
And
of
then
that.
there would be this interplay between the family and the school department, because back in Africa, if a child misbehaved in school, he'd to be taken home and beaten,
Yeah.
because that's the culture. Can't beat your kid here. So it was tremendous tension, particularly with the male fathers, you know, of like, I need to take care of the son, you know, and they saying, no, you can't do that, you know.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, so you really do have to get involved in all of these different things that you have learned. So 15 years ago, when you started to now, I mean, could you even imagine the journey that you were about to go
No.
on?
I had no clue. I had no clue. I was an artist and I was a professional weaver. And I just, you know, this is so far from, I have no training in social work whatsoever. It was like, as I said, on-job training.
Yeah.
in many different aspects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there professionals as well, though, who are working with you or giving you
Oh,
some
yeah,
help
there are
and guidance?
people that I can go to for, you know, that have expertise that help with applying for the green card and going through all that process. But I usually take them I go to the citizenship ceremonies, which is wonderful to see, this long journey, it takes you 5 years to go through
Wow.
to apply for your citizenship. But
Tell us about that.
such an emotional thing.
Like maybe the,
Right,
the
what's their
first
reaction?
time. Yeah, what was
What's their
and
reaction?
So somebody that you helped, and then you got to see them become a
Yeah,
citizen.
it's just like they have to apply for the green card, and they have to go through all the biometrics, the fingerprinting and the background check. They've gone through all this before they even get the I-94 to come into the country. But to get citizenship, it's a whole other process again. And so, you have to be in the country for 5 years before you can apply for citizenship. And then it's being speeded up a little bit, but it used to be a very slow process. And it could take up to a year after you had applied before your name was called. You had to go in for an interview. You had to prove that you could read and write. And
That's
they,
hard. You can read
if
and
you
write.
couldn't have
No, no
any,
kidding, yeah.
you could,
Huh?
they didn't want you to have any problems with the law in that period of
Sure.
time.
Sure.
So how many families over the last 15 years have you worked with?
I couldn't count.
Hmm.
I couldn't count.
Do you still keep in contact with some?
Oh, yes, they're family. At my husband's funeral, they came and danced and sang. It was a glorious experience.
Yeah,
it was
must be
just,
such a close relationship.
it really was, because they were,
And you're watching all these kids also grow up too.
the kids are, the ones that were born here are now graduating from high school, yeah. And even some in college. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, over 15 years. I'm thinking, on some of the other conversations that we've had, here are people who come to Worcester, refugee city. But now, with the climate that we're in, they must also, with all the culture going on, I'm just wondering how much they face with people who think that they are here illegally somehow,
Right.
or don't want to get their citizenship. I mean, there's so much of that out there right now that people are facing.
It's fear-mongering, though. It really is. And I think I'm 82 years old, and in my lifetime I have seen so many attempts to try to pick on certain groups of people. And right now it seems to be refugees or immigrants are the ones. And being a weaver, I have a book called The Run of the Mill, which is a history of the mills in New England. And I got it out last night because in my head I had a fact from the book, and I couldn't remember whether it was accurate or whether my memory had reworked it. And in it, it said that in Lawrence, Massachusetts, there were 51 countries represented with 49 languages
Wow.
within 1 mile of the mill.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1910, 90% of the people that lived in Lawrence were either first or second generation Americans. How quickly we forget.
Boy, what a great story. You're
Yeah.
right. How quickly we forget. We think it's all new, or it's only happening
Right.
now, or it's only happening in our lifetimes, or,
Right.
or to
Right.
us. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Which actually is a pretty hopeful note as we near the end of the show, because it means that in America we overcome, we survive, whoever that group may be at the time who is trying to keep others down. Usually in the end we get it right, hopefully.
That's right. I can remember when the Irish were picked on. Yeah, I'm old enough to remember that. I remember a man from Puerto Rico coming here to Worcester, not as a refugee because he's already a
Right.
citizen,
Yeah.
but coming here and saying they were picking on him at lunchtime at work. They were teasing him. They were picking on him as being,
Yeah, well, it's funny
the
you say
other.
that about the Irish, though, when you think of the Augustuses, the Pettys, the Murrays, the folks who are running the city of,
Yeah,
of Worcester
right,
right now.
exactly,
And there was a
exactly.
time when that would have been unimaginable. Because we are drawing very close to the end. If other people now want to follow your example, how can they get involved?
I would, right now with the situation politically, they've had to lay off people at Ascentria. The caseworkers, the people that manage the casework. I would just see if there's any chance of volunteering with them, or there's an interfaith group within the city that helps people that are already here that could use a leg up. You know, one of the things that we worry about is that when people, even if they get food stamps, they can't buy things like toilet paper and toothpaste and very essentials, because food stamps does not buy those kind of things. You can't buy that with food stamps. So that has to come out of your cash. And it's a real struggle.
Wow.
Can you imagine living like this one woman did for a year and a half with no cash? No cash.
Yeah, I
Wow.
know that more than you have coming in is going to your rent. 100%.
More than
is-
100, and
yeah,
then you're
more,
owing
yeah, right,
some.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is going to
I
it.
mean, just think of it. Can you imagine going for that length of time with no cash? It's just mind-blowing.
No,
So
it's
there are many, many ways to help. You can help with donating, and there's all kinds of ways that you can do that. I just say, look for the opportunities. And if it's not with refugees, look for other ways to help, because there are a lot of elderly in this city that don't have enough to do. And I think that this is, I really think that volunteering is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, what a show.
What
Boy,
a show.
yeah,
I mean,
your
I just wanted to give a
perspective, yeah.
different perspective of the refugee situation. And when I met Joyce, it felt like it was the right stories to share
Yeah.
with everyone. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for allowing me to come here.
Yeah, no, this was it was very, actually, it's very uplifting. And I mean, it's in some ways, you would think that maybe some of these stories could bring you down, but it really is a celebration of the human spirit.
Right.
What
Yeah,
people
that's
have
right.
done.
That's right.
And that there are so many good people like you who are helping them fulfill their dreams.
Well, thank you so much. I guess I wrap up.
Yes, indeed. Yes. Your
So
perspective.
to wrap up with my perspective, as I was just saying to Joyce, that I really felt that with her stories and the fact that someone worked with refugees for the last 15 years was a great perspective to share, especially in the current climate where we hear that refugees in such a negative manner are taking our jobs, coming here illegally, living off of our taxpayer money, et cetera, et cetera. But this was great because not only did it show that we're helping humanity, people that have suffered enough, and then this is a great way to not only learn from them and gain happiness from them and helping them, we also help humanity and make our own humanity. Thank you so much for joining us, and come back and watch with us again at Perspectives.